and welcome along to your Christmas wreath tutorial. Thank you so much for purchasing your wreath kit with us. We're so excited to show you how to make your Christmas wreath, end up with something really beautiful to place on your door this Christmas. So in your wreath kit, you will have received a mossed wreath ring. So this is just a metal 12-inch wreath ring with sphagnum moss on it that's nice and damp. So this is sort of the structure of your wreath, and the damp moss will keep your wreath looking fresh for longer. You'll see on your card that's in your box that if you water your moss, so sort of the back of your wreath, I'll show you here, if you water this area here where the moss is every few days, unless it's sort of rainy and then you don't necessarily need to. If you keep it nice and damp, your wreath will last much longer. Okay, so let's go through the ingredients that you would have received in your wreath kit. So, lots of beautiful texture in the ingredients we have for you. So you have some birch twigs, you have some Eucalyptus populus, really lovely, gorgeous berries, smells incredible. You have some Eucalyptus baby glue, again smells lovely, a really delicate kind of petal on this eucalyptus, so that adds a nice contrast. You've got some Eucalyptus Exotica berries, which have the most gorgeous sort of vibrant green berries, and then almost, I liken them to sort of acorn kind of cups as well, and on some really nice woody stems. You have some beautiful foliage called, now let me get this right, Grevillea. Correct me if I'm wrong, florists out there. Grevillea. So this has a really lovely red sort of woody stem and a really lovely green leaf, and also dries really nicely. You have some Skimmia, which adds a different contrast, I think, because the leaves are really nice, deep, dark green rather than sort of the more grey green that we have in the eucalyptus, and then the more sort of limey green we have with the berries and the Grevillea. Okay, so that's the Skimmia. And then moving on to the sort of more traditional Christmas foliages, we have this beautiful pine, so delicate, smells amazing, just smells like Christmas. You have some dried thyme. Now this looks dreadful, I appreciate it. It looks dreadful as it is. But once this is cut down, woven in amongst everything else, it adds a beautiful texture and just a little kind of, I don't know, added interest. Trust me. And then we have two different types of spruce. We've got the Nordman, which is the kind of more kind of grey green, sort of ties in a little bit with the eucalyptus kind of tone. And then we have the Noblest spruce, which is really chunky, beautiful, dark, rich green. So there is all your ingredients. Okay. So the best thing to do when you start your wreath making is to lay everything out in front of you. You can stop and start the video however you wish to do it, or you can just go along with me all the way through. Now, once you have all of your ingredients laid out, the first thing we need to do is to break everything down into sort of the sections that we want to use and incorporate into our wreath. So if we start with the birch twigs, remove the elastic band if you want to. And then this seems quite brutal, but you're just going to kind of take it off like that. Okay, so you've got really lovely tips of the birch twigs. Place that in your pile. And again, finish off. You might find some sort of lower down ones that are actually really lovely and delicate, so try and get those if you can as well. And you can choose if you want to keep the twigs long or you want to go shorter. It completely depends on how you like to style your wreath. Obviously, the longer you go, the sort of more wild it will look. If you go shorter, it'll be a bit more dense and a bit more compact. Completely your call. Both will look beautiful. So then we have the lovely Eucalyptus populus. So with this, you're sort of aiming to cut it down, using as much as you can into sort of sections like this. So I probably shouldn't have worn a green top, never mind. So you're looking at sort of sections like this. They can be shorter, they can be longer, but just around that mark. That's true. Those kinds of lengths. Using as much of it as possible, definitely including all of the berries. Just start breaking that down and pop it in the pile. Okay. Now moving on to your Eucalyptus baby blue. Again, similarly with the birch twigs, you can leave this long if you want to, if you want a really lovely wild kind of wreath. So if that is the case, I would keep the lengths quite long. That kind of length. You can keep these sections, this not as pretty, but they're really good to create that sort of depth behind. So you wouldn't necessarily see a section like this, but it would keep the wreath kind of looking more full because it would sit behind and then everything is then layered on top. So keep those. You might have a section in your wreath kit where you'll have little sort of prongs coming off the main stem. In this case, I would take the top off, and then with these slightly shorter bits, take those off individually too, because again, it just adds another texture. And just continue to break it down, because you can use these sections at the back where you won't see them, but again, like I said, it just adds another layer, so it fills your wreath. Okay. It's the baby blue. And then moving on to the Eucalyptus Exotica berries. It's so beautiful, one of my absolute favourites. With this, you're aiming to cut it down. You see? That kind of length. Not losing any of the berries. And even sections that are like this, you can still use, because the woody stem is still beautiful. Goes really lovely with the birch twigs, just adds another texture. Okay. Then moving on to the Grevillea. This may already be cut down slightly in your box, mainly so that it fit. You might find that I've cut them down already for you. If not, just break them down into sort of prongs like this. Again, you can keep these nice and long because they do look beautiful on the outside of your wreath. Okay. And now the green skimmia. Let's take this off. So with this, the leaves really are beautiful. You can cut it down in a way that utilises as much as possible. So if, for example, you take one of the buds like this, another like that, and then say you're left with this small bud, you take that one off. Don't throw that away, keep that. Take the rest of the stem off, and then you have something else to add to your wreath. So using as much of the ingredients as possible. So again, take the bud and then keep the lower leaves to add. Ooh. Okay, so that's your skimmia. Let's move on to the Nordman. Again, I may have cut this down slightly for you to fit it in your boxes. So you might find you already have sections just like this. You might have sections more like this, or you might have a mixture. If you have sections like this and we need to break it down further, what I find helpful is turning it round, and then you then see the sections a bit clearer. So you're aiming to cut them down into these sort of little kind of like 3-pronged sections. Again, use as much as you can, because the smaller bits work perfectly for the centre of your wreath as you go around. They're a bit more delicate. With the top section, which looks like this, you can just take it off like that. Add that to your pile. Okay. So with the pine, you'll probably have beautiful stems like this. So for this, we're going to break it down into sections that are around this length. If, for example, you have a shorter section like this, take that off too, because that can be used again for the inside of your wreath. So just to recap on this pinus, you're aiming for sections just like this. It smells amazing. Okay. So now we have the pine cut down. For your dried thyme, again, a bit like the birch twigs, you take your sort of section, your bunch, and just take off the sort of scraggly ends at the bottom, so that you're left with these kind of textural dried sections here. those in your pile. And then lastly, we have the next spruce. Again, to fit it in your box, I probably cut it down a little bit. So you might be left with sections like this. Perfect, keep those. You might have sections like this, again, keep those. Or you might have slightly bigger sections whereby you need to break it down further. So much like with the Nordman, you're aiming for the sort of three-pronged sections. Again, some will be bigger than others. That's fine. Variety of sizes is absolutely fine. And don't waste any of the sort of smaller sections because we can use those on the inside of the wreath. Okay. In your wreath kit, you would have also received some alder mini pine cones that are ready wired in little clusters, some single wired closed pine cones, and beautiful moss green velvet ribbon for hanging. I've also included, just in case, some twine, just in case you don't want a ribbon, or maybe you have a colour door that it doesn't work with. So it's completely up to you. Or if you wanted to, you can hang with the twine and then make a little bow out of the ribbon if you wish. Completely up to you. I'll put these behind for now. Okay, so let's make a start. You will also have received a spool of wire. Now, to begin, take your spool of wire and your mossed wreath frame. Let's clear this a bit. Okay. And to start off, we're just going to wrap the twine, the wire, the binding wire, around your frame, like this. So you've got your spool in one hand, and it's attached to your wreath frame by wrapping it around a few times. Okay, now, so that your wreath looks as professional as possible, the best piece of advice that I could give is to work either in a clockwise or anti-clockwise motion. So every element that you add onto your wreath is heading in either one of those directions. No sort of some pointing this way, some pointing this way, because that's how you then become a little bit confused and it doesn't look quite so neat and professional. And by neat, I don't mean compact and really structured. It can still be really wild and natural and foraged. It just looks so much more beautiful when it follows either way. So I personally go in a clockwise motion. I'm right-handed. I don't know if that makes a difference, but see how you feel. You'll feel when you place your foliages on your wreath which way you want to go. So to begin, we start by making, in essence, little posies of the foliages that we have. So for example, I would start with probably my bulkiest foliage. So I'll start with the spruce. So that will form my backdrop. And I will then start adding. I sort of tend to take sort of maybe one bit of each. So I might take some pine. I might take a longer section of the dry thyme. Behind, I'll go in with some twigs, some birch twigs. I then might go for some grevillea. I need to look that up. I will look that up and work out how to say it properly. Forgive me if I am saying it completely wrong. Some Eucalyptus baby blue, some populus, Then I would add on here a little sprig of the berries, some of this dried thyme again to add some texture at the front. If you've got any, a few of the more delicate birch twigs to head up the front. And then I'd finish with a cluster of pine cones, which I'd place slightly further down in my posy. So in this posy, as you'll see, I've got slightly longer on the outside and slightly shorter that will be placed into the centre of the wreath ring. Now, to start with, either choose a side. I choose the left because I then go round in a clockwise motion. You then place your posy directly onto your wreath, facing slightly, I would say 11 o'clock. You hold quite firmly and then you wrap. I would go around about 3 times. And that's your first section in place. If we place that back down again, I would then twist just a tiny bit, just so that I've then got that next section, this section here, to the side for me to lay the next posy down on top. So again, let's start building, taking different sections, ideally with the smaller, slightly more delicate cuttings that we've got in the inside of the wreath ring. With the skimmer, I would say use it for every other one, and then maybe on the other ones use more of the berries, so then you get sort of a bit more of a difference for each kind of section of your wreath, and it adds interest. Again, I pop some twigs behind because that twig will then lay on top of the previous section. A little bit of thyme, just to add that texture. And then I would go in with a closed pine cone just to add a bit of interest, because the previous one we've gone with the cluster, and then for the next one we'll go in with the closed. Now you take your section, your posy, and you pop it on top of your previous section that you've just binded to the wreath ring. So it will be going on top. Place it firmly down, holding on to all the stems, ensuring that the previous section's wire is hidden, and then bind again, probably 3 times. Perfect. And then you twist. Okay. Again, taking some more sections for your next posy. So the previous section I used some of the green skimmer, so for this section I'm going to go a bit heavier on the Eucalyptus, Exotica berries, and also maybe add some of the Populus. Some baby blue out the side, twig behind, some dried thyme in front. Again, you can kind of move this around, weave it in and out amongst the foliages. And then I'm going to add my pine cone cluster at the bottom. So again, placing it slightly at a sort of 11 o'clock position on top of the previous posies wire that you've bound around your wreath. Holding it nice and firm, be confident and bind that posy cluster to your wreath ring. Okay, and then twist. I'm starting again. Adding some skimmier in this time. I'm going to go in with the shorter section of the baby blue and also a longer section as well. Bit of the Eucalyptus populus. Maybe a smaller twig at the front and a longer, sturdier twig at the back. A little bit dry to time. Leave that amongst. And then going for a closed pine cone, this one. So, placing it a slight 11 o'clock to your wreath ring, which if you imagine your wreath side of your wreath ring is 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, slight angle, lay down on top of your previous section's wire, hold it confidently, nice and tight, and bind. It doesn't matter if you have leaves or the stems or the any sort of bits underneath your binding wire. It's completely hidden by the next section, so don't waste your time sort of making sure it's all perfectly neat, because you can't see it. And then twist. Okay. Next section. Bring the skimmier to the front a little bit. Okay. And twigs at the back and a pop one at the front. A little bit of dry thyme, not too much. Small section. And then this time I think I might wait actually and create a bit more of a kind of cluster of pine cones there, and then I might add another kind of cluster here at the other side. I think that will look nice. So place on top again and wrap around. If you want to, you can cluster all your pine cones. It can look really, really effective all on one side, maybe sort of just slightly down and to one side, some kind of almost going in to the inner sort of circle of the wreath. That looks amazing. But have fun with it. You know, it doesn't have to follow this sort of structure. You can play around with it, you can get creative, you can cluster, you can maybe put them a cluster of all the small ones together and the bigger ones more spaced out. It's completely up to you. It's your kit. Hopefully just by watching how to place the posies on and how to cut and break down your foliages, it will give you the confidence to sort of do what you want to do with it and style it however you like. So let's crack on with another section. Skimmier again. Berries as well. Eucalyptus. Okay, twig behind this time and some dry thyme at the front. What are you thinking to the dry thyme? Do we like? It's not the prettiest when it's in a bunch, is it? But I do think it adds a really lovely texture. Okay, so going along with my clustering that side, I'm imagining that this is the top, so the clusters are over here, bit of a break here, and then I'll probably add a little cluster here. So lay that on top. And bind round. And then twist. So you've got your next section just there, ready. I'm going to use a bit of just a skimmier leaf this time. These lovely dark green leaves. Some baby blue. Twig behind, smaller twig in front. Again, a bit of the dry thyme. More pine, I love this pine. Place on top. Start binding round. Okay. And then twist. What's happened with my wire there? Extra. So I've got that section, and now I think I'm going to add over the two next posy sections. I'm going to add my next two pine cones. I'll go skimmier again this time. Put one of these sort of chunkier baby blue stems behind, just to add another layer. Twig behind. Add some Eucalyptus populus as well. Some dried thyme. I find this works really, really beautifully with the pine cones. And then I'm going to go for a cluster, I think. So the cluster goes nearer the bottom of the sort of the posy. Placed on top, 11 o'clock, and then bind. And twist. Okay. Twig behind. Dry thyme at the front, and then pine cone just on top of that. Pointing at 11 o'clock, and bind that round. you. I'm probably at this point heading into my last 2 sections, I think. So this is where you can decide whether you want to keep some of your leftovers for a bud vase, sort of tablescape or something, or whether you just really want to put everything in your wreath. Decision is yours. Use all your best bits. I'm going to go behind with one of the chunkier kind of eucalyptus stems. What did I use last time? With the skinnier this time. Okay. Little bit more of the dried thyme on the front and weave it in. Longer twig behind. I am actually going to cut this section down a bit, mainly because we're coming to the end of your wreath ring. So you want to be able to tuck it underneath the sort of the first section that we added. So I think this is the penultimate one. I think there's going to be one afterwards. So bind this to your wreath ring. And then twist. Okay, final posy, I think. Yes. So add whatever you want left over. I'm going to try and add as much as possible for this last section. But again, if you do have things left over, a couple of, really simple bud vases or, your favourite pot, and just stick some fresh water in, pop them in, lovely little display. It's all nice and Christmassy. I'm just going to try and use all the kind of leftover bits that we have. Eucalyptus populus, twigs, and some dried thyme. Okay, so for your last section, much like I did just on the previous one, I am going to trim it down a little bit. So take any sort of longer stem. So you've got quite a short posy there. This is the bit that's probably the trickiest because it is a little bit fiddly, but be confident, you're not going to damage the wreath. It's really sturdy. Just be confident and just go with it. And if you have to take it off and rebind, not a problem. So you're aiming to take your posy and you almost need to sort of tuck it under the first section that we added. So that's going underneath the previous section. If I hold it up, so it's just going underneath, this is it, underneath. Okay. Now, like I said, just be confident, get your hands in, it doesn't matter. Hold it nice and tight. Try and take out anything that might be tucked under your hands from the first section that we added, and then bind round. Perfect. Now, once you've added your last section, take your reel and then you need to just cut probably to about here. So you're left with the tail of the wire. Now take that tail behind. And you can see the copper wreath ring here. So what you're aiming for is to thread the wire behind and then over. And then do it once more. So thread the wire behind and then over. Trim it down a little if it needs to be. And then you're just going to tuck it through. So your wreath is ready now to be hung, or to have either the string or the velvet ribbon added. I'm going to go with the velvet ribbon. So if you take it and sort of measure it in half. Now, like I said before, I've gone for sort of a cluster on one side and then another cluster on the other side. So I'm thinking that my top is probably it's either where we started. I think my top is here. So have a look at your wreath. Stand in a mirror if you want to with it, or ask, if you're doing this with friends or family, ask them what they think, where they think your top is. And then thread your velvet ribbon through. Lay it back down on the table. So meet the two ends in the middle, and then you're going to tie a knot at the end. Somehow. Okay. So you've got a nice tight knot. Trim if you would like to. Then this knot is going to be sitting behind the wreath, so this won't be on show. So you then simply pull it through, leave the knot behind, and there you have it. You hang this on the door, over your knocker. You can get those really clever wreath hangers now. You can get them from loads of places. Have a Google. They just sit over your door, and then they provide a hook that you then would sort of hang this over. And again, you can make this shorter if you need to. You can also make a bow out of it if you'd rather, and use the twine, whichever way you want to hang it. The one thing I would say with the twine is I've cut them nice and long so that you can double up. I've had a few wreath casualties in my time, whether they've just used one single sort of length of twine, and it's been so heavy that it's fallen off. So double up, and then much like we did with the velvet ribbon, find your top, thread through, and then simply create a knot at the top. Okay, so there you have it. How are they looking? I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've managed to relax, maybe had a glass of wine or some mulled wine, gin and tonic. And I hope you've enjoyed being creative for 45 minutes. I'd love to see your wreaths. Please send me photographs. Nothing makes me happier. And have a lovely, lovely Christmas.